This is TW Wrestling Talk here. And I'm gonna alert you right now. I'm gonna put a spoiler alert on this edition of TW Wrestling Talk going forward. As I was at Smackdown last night in Hershey, Pennsylvania, live. Um, I gotta say it was a rather interesting show. Of course, they start off with doing the taping for a main event and Saturday Morning Slam. But once it got to SmackDown, things got better. Obviously, as you would expect. But this was a special edition of SmackDown, in my eyes, as it featured The Rock, um, opening the show with a rather, decent sized promo, as you would expect. Um, And again, if you don't want to know what happened, if you want to see for yourself what happened on SmackDown, um, I would I would encourage you to save this video until after you've seen it, as I have spoilers ahead. But I have some interesting thoughts too to offer, so I would at least encourage that you would watch it either way at some point. Um, but this was it opened with The Rock. In fact, that was a big incentive in going to this show. Was It was advertised that The Rock would be there, so I thought, yeah, let's go see SmackDown in Hershey, as it's in my neck of the woods. I'm kind of smack dab between the middle somewhere of Philadelphia and Hershey, as I live in Berks County in Reading, near Reading, so um, I saw Raw, a house show of Raw in October in Reading, so I figured, we'll go see SmackDown see SmackDown, and obviously, given that The Rock was going to be there, to me it was a can't miss. Um, and it was a good show. I gotta say, it opened with The Rock promo, as I said earlier. Um, and The Rock, you know, he was great as always. He had some good. He had story time with The Rock. How his whole he explained how his whole candy ass trademark phrase came about in Hershey, PA, and you'll have to see you have to see that for yourself. But the big thing that happened here, wasn't that John Cena came out or something like that. Um, uh, how about this? I'll play the theme song. We're sitting there listening to The Rock tell some you know doing his shtick as always, doing no wrong on the mic. Um, but suddenly he was interrupted by this music. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he was interrupted by none other than John Laurinaitis, Mr. Excitement, as the Titatron is telling me here. Big Johnny Ace, People Power. So now a lot of people didn't like this. I know. Um, I pers I personally loved that. Love that John Laurinaitis was back. Um, and I've said before, just the vibe you get around him at times, of authority. I just he, to me he worked better as a general manager as Vicky Guerrero. He worked better than AJ. Um, and I think WWE was too quick to make him the punchline of John Cena jokes week after week, and CM Punk, and when he was a face. And to me, that's what killed John Laurinaitis, his career in WWE. But they just made him a joke job. Um, he'd stumble over a word every now and then, his tone of voice, and they decide to make those post punchlines of jokes, and effectively it killed you know to me the his good run as general manager. Um, he gave me a Vince McMahon heel vibe in some ways, but maybe not in tone of voice, but just being in charge. That's the way I look at it. Um, Kind of like a Paul Heyman vibe in some ways. You know, that's and you know Paul Heyman is one of the best managers slash mic workers in WWE history, man of authority, however you want to look at it. Um, but John Laurinaitis came out and he offered a business proposition of being in The Rock's corner at WrestleMania. He pointed out that you know The Rock is the people's champion and whatnot, and how John Laurinaitis himself um, created people power. So you know he kind of pointed out a connection there, and he offered to be in The Rock's corner at WrestleMania. As he said, how John Cena was the guy that got him fired in the first place. And of course, he said that Teddy Long allowed John Laurinaitis to be on the show and whatnot, so that's why he was able to come out apparently. Um, but this was it was interesting. I mean, you know, The Rock pondered it and he asked the fans if John Laurinaitis should be in The Rock's corner. Of course, the fans were heavily against that. Um, and And of course, what ended up happening is, well, The Rock said, you know, he's not he's gonna, you know, he's shaking his hand, and you know, he said he wasn't gonna give John Laurinaitis a rock bottom, and he said he was gonna give him a handshake. So he was shaking his hand. He wouldn't. He John Laurinaitis was trying to let go, and he wouldn't let go, and then into a spine buster went John Laurinaitis, and then The Rock, of course, did a people's elbow on John Laurinaitis, you know, effectively making it clear that John Laurinaitis would not be in his corner at WrestleMania. So that was that. You know, John Laurinaitis went away, and I think they went to a commercial break, and you know, The Rock was going to the corners and whatnot, and well, of course, before The Rock even spoke, he pulled out a Hershey bar from his pocket and before he even started speaking early in the promo, and then he went. I don't know if this will be on if you'll see this on Friday or not, but maybe it was during a commercial break. He pulled out a gigantic Hershey bar, maybe the size of 20 of them, and he autographed it, and he kind of like tossed it into a group of young boys in the front row, and they all kind of were grabbing on it. So who knows who got that? A gigantic autographed Hershey bar from Hershey's chocolate bar by The Rock. That's that's it's got to be a pretty sweet you know artifact there. No pun intended. So, but anyhow, so this raises the question though: Does does um does John Cena potentially enlist? Does John Laurinaitis potentially offer himself on Raw next week to be in John Cena's corner at WrestleMania? It does present an interesting scenario here. It's something that could potentially happen. Um, you know, other some people would maybe say, though, however, that there's no way of that happening. But it's odd here because there was some teasing as I said earlier in this edition of TW Wrestling Talk in part one, how John Cena was maybe possibly teasing a heel turn. Then again, you got to take into consideration, there's probably a 9-1 odds against John Cena turning heel, but it was just interesting that John Laurinaitis came out and that The Rock turned him down, and you just gotta wonder if John Laurinaitis is then gonna try to get involved with Cena here. I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on. That's for sure. So, and John Laurinaitis being back now, maybe you're hearing it here first. Um, that's that's some big stuff to me. So, he made his return there in Hershey. I was there live to see it, so that's pretty interesting. So we'll have to see what happens in the near future. Um, on Monday on Raw. With regarding John Laurinaitis. Um, Other than that, the important stuff. Chris Jericho, he was in a match. He beat Wade Barrett. Um, and I don't know. And there wasn't a whole lot. Around that. They had the bench press challenge between um Ryback and Mark Henry, and unfortunately to me, this segment fell a little short. Um, First of all, they say how in the they were doing it like they do in the NFL scouting combine when they have reps of 225. Um, Now I'm into my powerlifting, and let's just say the plates probably were not 45s. They were probably much lighter, and they were pretending to like Mark Henry, he did he did 53 reps, and I think the audience counted 54 if I'm not mistaken. But after he was done, um, Booker T said 53, so I guess we'll just go with 53. Um, so he apparently got 53 reps. Um, and again, they said like the scouting combine record was like 50, I think, or um, they'll say on Smackdown obviously again, but then they had Ryback do it, and again, if Mark Henry is supposedly supposed to be the world's strongest man, even though he's never in the metrics competitions, which to me are they are premier they're like the premier strongman events in my eyes, that air around New Year's every year. Um, he's never in that competition. I'd like to see how he fares in a competition like that, where it's more than just a powerlifting competition. Um, but you how would Ryback? You'd think if Mark Henry's supposed to be the world's strongest man, then Ryback wouldn't be able to surpass him in reps. Um, now, first of all, I just gotta say that you'll clearly be able to see that if you have any powerlifting knowledge, the bar is supposed to touch your chest when you bench, for it to be considered good. Even as long as it slightly touches or looks like it touches, your chest, and it's considered a good rep. And Ryback maybe does this, um, maybe five out of the whole, you know, out of all the reps he does. He's doing like half reps the whole time, and I'm sitting there thinking, dude, these are half reps. Like practically none of these are good. But for some odd reason, they acted like they were all good reps. And not to rip Ryback or anything, but that's just that's what you could clearly see. And so he supposedly gets to 53, which essentially ties Mark Henry, and then he starts doing his 54th rep, and it looks like he's going to do it. And then Mark Henry kind of pushes the ref who is spotting Ryback. He pushes the ref out of the way, and he starts pushing down the bar, and it looks like Ryback is fighting it upwards, um, which I would find quite ironic. Um, and because after doing all those reps and having Mark Henry push down, how would you be able to fight that? That's just silly. I mean, it looked pretty silly, and then he pushes the barbell down to Ryback's neck, and he does he like does this. They didn't have clamps on the bar, for one thing, so clamp clamps on the side that keeps the weight plates from sliding along the bar, and so they have you know kind of Ryback getting choked out here by Mark Henry, and so he like kind of dumps the one side of down and the other, and you get this clanging and
Oh my God!
one of those where I don't know if you've seen them before, but I've definitely seen things like that happen before. Um, when they dump the weights one side, and then that immediately causes the other side to dump. So that's essentially what happened then, and I couldn't. He was kind of choked out then, and it was silly because like no, the ref and Booker T and they were all just kind of watching him do this then, and for like 10, 15 seconds, and they didn't do anything about it. So it just looks kind of silly, and you know, so I don't know that segment. I don't that kind of fell a little short to me. Um, you know, we'll see what people say after they see it. On Smackdown on Friday, see what people say online and Bleacher Report, whatnot, whatever. But um, after that, well, later on, I guess at the end of the show, they had the main event, which was Big Show, uh, yeah, that new team of Sheamus, Big Show, and Orton. But before that, what interested me is something that was you know a little interesting, and they were getting interviewed backstage. Um, and Orton was a little more peppy than you would imagine. He was a little more like of a team player. You imagine, like, come on, guys, like let's go, and you'll see what I mean when you see it on SmackDown on Friday. Um, unless you're one of the unless you're a rare viewer who was actually there live in person last night. Um, but yeah, you'll see it on SmackDown if you haven't seen it already. That the way Orton kind of is a little strange in this interview, and Sheamus and Big Show kind of give him strange looks on top of it, and it's maybe teasing this heel turn, um, where that could take place, where maybe Orton does become aligned with the Shield, and that would definitely work as a heel turn method for Randy Orton. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with this. Um, but yeah, I mean, they had that main event, those three guys against the Rhodes Scholars, and who was the other guy? Cesaro, and of course, the bigger names got the win here, and then the off air main event. Well, I should mention that after the match, the Shield were coming down to attack. In fact, I looked up in one of the aisles where I thought they would probably come down, and I saw a guy in a suit um, who was kind of like telling people like step aside a while and make. And I'm thinking, oh, here comes the Shield. Lo and behold, within the matter of like 5 seconds, they came and they started coming down the steps. Except Roman Reigns down, down more. I was like sitting on the other side from where they would come down, so I could see. I was sitting like where Zamboni would come out, essentially, in like the corner of of the rink in a hockey game. So I was like sitting from the opposite side of that, so I had a pretty good view of seeing them, where they were coming down, and then Roman Reigns was coming down the steps. As you if you would go down the next row, if you would go down closer to this where the stage is. Um, but Big Show and Sheamus and Orton decided not to wait for him to come down. They decided to go over the barricades themselves, go up the stairs, and start beating them up. And so they started doing that. Um, it was interesting. You'll see it on SmackDown. They were brawling in the stands a little bit. They got to this like skybox, this upper deck. They were brawling up there. Um, throwing them over the tables they had up there. Um, looked like there was some beer splashing around or some kind of drink splashing around from where I was sitting. I'm sure they'll have a better camera angle of that this Friday night. And they yeah, and it just kind of ended with them getting thrown kind of out of view and I guess retreating, and the three of that Big Show, Sheamus, and Orton standing atop that skybox, standing tall, and so that I guess that's how the show went off the air. And then they went they went back down to the ring then because they were supposed to have an off-air match then against the Shield, and they did. So the Shield they went back down to the ring. Shield's music hit again. They came down the ring. Although, except the twist here was Big Show exited through the crowd backstage, and then Ryback came out. So instead of Big Show, this time it was Ryback in place of Big Show, facing off against the Shield. Um, Interesting match, 6-man tag match, but it ended with disqualification when when the Shield got a chair involved in the match. So yeah, I mean, Shield got disqualified. It prevented them from losing clean or anything, so it was good. And they just kept brawling then, and Sheamus, Orton, and Ryback got the better of them. So um, nothing too unexpected there. So yeah, I mean, overall it was a pretty decent showing, I think, on WWE's part here. I was pretty pleased. Got to see The Rock, of course. Um, I saw Ryback, Orton, Big Show, Sheamus, those big name faces. Got to see the Shield for the first time. Um, so yeah, I mean, pretty pleased. John Laurinaitis came back. Um, so yeah, I was definitely pretty pleased with this show. Not to mention Chris Jericho. I shouldn't forget him. I almost forget him because they have him in like in this gimmick or this story against a gimmick guy like Fandango and whatever, and to me that's worthy of that. So, but again, I was pretty pleased overall with this show, and yeah, it was definitely pretty memorable. Got to see The Rock, as I said, and with the new WWE Championship, and so decent stuff here on their part. Um, and I find it funny how I didn't even mention what happened with the World Heavyweight Championship, but nothing too special happened there. So you'll see that on SmackDown, whatever happened then. So that's that. So thanks for tuning into this SmackDown spoiler edition of TW Wrestling Talk. Um, again, I can only do this SmackDown spoiler edition because I was there in person, and it's always a cool thing to be there in person, no doubt. And it was a good episode too. So um, let me know give me any thoughts you had on this edition of SmackDown and this edition of TW Wrestling Talk. Your thoughts. Love to hear them as always. And thanks for tuning in this edition of TW Wrestling Talk.